Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Wexler?
Here.
Mr. Rogan?
Here.
Mr. Evans? Here. Mr. Gahn?
Here.
Mr. McGough?
Here. I make a motion to appoint Councilman Wexler, temporary chair for the Committee on Public Safety.
Second.
On the question, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it and so moved. Dispense with the reading of the minutes.
Third order, 3A, minutes of the regular meeting of the members of the Scranton Housing Authority held July 7, 2014.
Are there any comments? If not, received and filed.
3B, comparison of city funds distributed from the single tax office for the years 2013 and 2014.
Are there any comments? If not, received and filed.
3C, agenda for the Board of Zoning Appeals meeting held September 10, 2014.
Are there any comments? If not, received and filed.
3D, audit status report from Robert Rossi and Company received August 29, 2014.
Are there any comments? If not, received and filed.
3E, tax assessors reports for the hearing dates to be held September 17, September 20, 23, and 24, 2014.
Are there any comments? If not, received and filed.
3F, controllers report for the month ending July 31, 2014.
Are there any comments? If not, received and filed.
3G, report on the financial statements of the Redevelopment Authority dated December 31, 2013.
Are there any comments? If not, received and filed. Are there any announcements from members of council?
I have two. On Saturday, September 13th, this Saturday from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m., Pause at the Park will take place at Naog Park. It'll be a fun-filled day of crafts, live entertainment, concessions, photographers, and of course, animal rescues. All of the proceeds from this event will benefit low-cost spay and neuter animal rescue. Secondly, St. Anne's Maronite Catholic Church, located at the corner of Sumner Avenue and Price Street in West Scranton, will hold its annual parish festival this coming Sunday, September 14th from 12 noon until 7 p.m. There will be a huge variety of homemade Lebanese foods and pastries to enjoy, along with Arabic coffees, auction baskets, 50-50 raffles, a rummage sale, games, music, and plenty of fun for the entire family. Thank you.
Anyone else? Would like to make two announcements. First, apparently I added some confusion last week by talking about the elevator and the possibility of moving council meetings. The change of location for council meetings will take place when the renovations to the elevator take place. That is not, we're not sure of what dates those are or when that will take place. Be assured that the date and location of any future council meetings or changes will be made well in advance so that people will be aware of the change. And also, we will be introducing CDBG funding or through OECD, funding through OECD tonight. Next week there will be a public hearing on that funding. That public hearing will be at 5:30 in council chambers.
Fourth order, citizens' participation.
Bill Jackowitz.
Good evening, Scranton City Council, Kathy, City Council Stenographer Laurie and Emil. I'm going to start off with the school board. The school board kind of reminds me of the Affordable Care Act, and better known as the Obamacare. Let's pass it and then we'll read it later. I mean, how can you pass a contract and give raises to people when you haven't even gone over it? I know this isn't just refers to city business because it is the Scranton School Board. How do you do that? How do you give raises to people when you haven't even read the contract yet? And as far as I know, the contract hasn't even been signed yet. I don't understand it. This is one of the reasons why Scranton continually gets itself into trouble. Okay, moving on. Bogart Court. You know, I understand we're turning it into one-way. I got no problem with that. I always thought it was a one-way. But anyway, when are we going to get some businesses in the 500 block Lackawanna Avenue? It's been 10 years now. And Scranton City Council voted for it. And Bill Corright was one of the city council members who voted for the redevelopment and demolition of the 500 block Lackawanna Avenue. And no one has moved into it. The businesses that are there now, none of them were part of the project. None of them. So that's $30 million worth of taxpayers' money sitting there. As far as making it into one-way court, I have no problem at all with that. Okay, the kids swim free. What money are we talking about?
I'm sorry?
The kids swim free. You voted on it last week, something about the money for the kids swim free program. You're establishing an account for it. What money are we talking about?
There was a $10,000, I think it was $10,000, correct, donation?
Yeah, it was a $10,000 donation from Allied. Is that what we're talking about?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to know where the money came from, because for years and years and years, we were told there was no money. So now all of a sudden, I fought this for 7 years, Mr. McGough. Quit giving me those eyes, will you? I fought this for 7 years. I raised money. We had five years I ran programs from donations from city residents and city businesses, because we were told by the Scranton Recreation Department year after year after year after year that they had no money to pay for the upkeep of the pool. That's why I'm bringing this up.
This money was just received.
I know that. I'm just saying. I asked where the money came from, and I got an answer. Okay? That's all I wanted to know, is where the money came from. Because for years we were told there was no money by the Parks and Recreation Board. They told us for years and years and years there was no money.
There wasn't.
Now all of a sudden we got money. I asked where it came from. You gave me an answer. So why are we prolonging this discussion?
I don't...
Okay, as far as grants go, don't depend on too much money from the federal government, because they're broke. And they're damn sure not going to give any money to distressed cities like Scranton, who has a history of blowing all the money that they get. So I'm just saying, don't count on a lot of grant money coming from the federal government. And if you don't get a lot from the federal government, don't count on a lot of money coming from the state government, because you're not going to get any from them either. So let's really balance this budget this year. Let's work hard at it, and let's just spend the money that we have. Okay? Okay, you know, in the caucus, you guys were talking about follow-up on garbage fees, and I guess everything, what I got out of it, everything is going to seem to stop in October or November, and nothing will also be done on it. That's how we fell $7.2 million behind. Again, I'll reemphasize, it's time to start with some SOPs, standard operating procedures, and checklists, so that the person who is in charge of collecting the garbage fees will have a checklist in front of them, and it will tell them, it would be a reminder, don't forget to send out delinquent tax garbage bills to the people who didn't pay. Simple. Mr. McGough, when you meet with the mayor on every Monday, why don't you bring this up to him if you haven't already done it? The administrative department in this city needs to start doing their JOB and start doing things that need to be done, SOPs and checklists. Okay, now changing subjects again. Boots on the ground. Why do you think the boots that military people wear and people have worn for years, even though they've changed, why are they called combat boots? Can someone answer me that for me? Why are they called combat boots? They're called combat boots because the military, the war fighters who wear those boots are going into combat. It doesn't matter what their AFSC is or what their MOS is. So if somebody's trying to tell you that there's no boots on the ground, don't believe them, because they're not telling you the truth. As soon as those war fighters step off the plane or the ship or wherever, and those combat boots hit the ground, and their BDUs hit the ground, and the war fighter, an American war fighter is in those BDUs and wearing those combat boots, guess what? We have combat troops on the ground.
Thank you. Joan Hodowanitz.
Joan Hodowanitz, city resident. Once again, the city audit due on May 31st. It's 103 days late. And you have 65 days until November 15th, when the city must present its proposed 2015 budget to you. I don't know whether or not the mayor watches these meetings. I hope he does. And Mr. McGough, I think it's very good that you meet with him on a weekly basis, and perhaps you can pass some of these comments on to him. There's still 24 items outstanding on the city budget, the city audit. But this brings to mind the issue that the city needs personnel who are trained in government accounting, how to prepare financial statements in accordance with GAO standards. Now, you should be aware that the University of Scranton, which teaches courses in accounting and offers degrees in accounting, does teach government accounting courses. And perhaps one of the novel things that we might consider is asking the university to come down here and train the staff down here, perhaps in lieu of some of their taxes. It would be a win-win situation for both sides. I also hope that when the mayor presents his 2015 proposed budget, that we can identify the people in the budget who are going to be responsible for preparing future budgets. And their job description should require that they know how to do government accounting. If not, you know, you've got nobody able to do it. And hopefully we'll get some standard operating procedures done. With regard to items 5C and 5D on the agenda, the delinquent refuse fees and the delinquent taxes and other fees, I hope that the city will provide to the city council periodic updates on how much delinquent fees and taxes are outstanding and how we're doing collecting those taxes. It is one thing to have an ordinance or resolution on delinquent fees and taxes. It's another thing to collect them. If we're not able to collect them, then we're still at square one. And we need these delinquent fees and taxes. And finally, I read the compliance audit for the aggregate pension fund that Mr. Di Pasquale briefed us on the other week. And I'm going to turn to the finding on page 5. Finding: failure to timely pay the minimum municipal obligation of the plants. Okay. Apparently, the city did not pay the MMO required by December 31st, 2013. The city deposited the remaining MMO balance of $2 million into the fund on January 31st, 2014. However, the city failed to pay interest due on the late deposit. Cause: city officials failed to establish adequate internal control procedures to ensure that the full amount of the MMO due was paid timely, and that the interest due on the late payment of the 2013 MMO was determined and paid in accordance with Section 302 of Act 205. Management's response: municipal officials agreed with the finding without exception. On May 28, 2014, the city paid $185,300 for the interest due to the police and firemen's pension plans for the late payment of the 2013 MMO. That's our tax dollars. That $185,000 should never have been incurred. Now that's bad enough. What I want to know from the mayor, and maybe Mr. McGough, you can bring this issue up, is have we now implemented the appropriate internal control procedures so this will never happen again? It's one thing for the city taxpayers to contribute to the pension plans, and that's legitimate. To pay $185,000 as a penalty because we missed a payment is not acceptable. And it was an internal control failure. I understand that some of this happened on the previous watch, but there'll be no excuse if it happens again. You're going to see some irate taxpayers here the next time we see an audit finding like this. This is not excusable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Odowanis. Oops. Ozzie Quinn?
Evening. Ozzie Quinn, President of the Hill Neighborhood Association and also President of the Scranton, Lackawanna County Taxpayers Association. First, the Hill Neighborhood Association will meet on Wednesday, September 24th, 7 p.m. at the Immaculate Conception Church. Dennis Gallagher, Director of DPW, will be our guest. The Hill Neighborhood Association would like to thank Councilman Bill Gahn and Joe Wexler for attending our meetings to get the pulse of the neighborhood people. The council is invited to attend our 9/24 meeting. Tonight I'd like to address the council regarding the Lackawanna County's Tax Claim Bureau September 29th upset sale of 1,200 city properties who are delinquent in property taxes. Of these 1,200 properties, roughly 600 are vacant land, and the other 600 are land with improvements on, i.e. houses. In regards to 5D, Northeastern Revenue, right? What is the cost of that contract?
I believe it's 15% of the collections.
I don't see how all these properties become delinquent if they're doing their job, you know? It's just unbelievable. Those delinquent taxpayers that are fortunate to be able to muster up enough money to pay off the back taxes will not be on the list. At the upset sale, a bidder may make a bid for a property. The bidder must bid the minimum tax owed. However, must be responsible to pay for the liens on a property if they win the bid. At the upset sale, these homes are not sold, will go to a judicial sale next February. At the judicial sale, the bidder does not have to pay the liens, interest, or penalties. They get clear title to the property. My argument is that the judicial sale is tantamount to like an amnesty. Why would we give the property to a bidder who's going to put one of our own out the street, okay? And it'll be an absentee landlord. And we define, the Hill Neighborhood Association defines an absentee landlord as anyone who owns a property, however, does not reside in the structure. The city only has 3 inspectors, and they have a lot of area to cover. And hopefully in the next budget, you'll expand that to at least 5 or 6. Now, what I'm fearful is that if the judicial sale, if these people don't get it, they're out. If they don't sell the properties, it goes into the Lackawanna County repository. And once it's in the repository, it's in the graveyard. You're never going to get the property sold. They'll never be sold. And those taxes will never be collected. Right now, there's 200 city properties in the repository. It's just dropping into a dark hole. So there got to be another way to collect those taxes. We have to start being a little creative here, you know, in regards to putting people out in the street because they don't pay their taxes, we don't get any revenue, and, you know, in the future you won't get any revenue. Lastly, if a home is not sold, you know, it goes into the repository. Again, as I said last January, and I plead with council to please continue the September sale and try to do something to stop this here sale. It's ridiculous. 1,200 properties, 600 with homes, and if they're not sold, you know, we're going to have absentee landlords. We're very much worried in the Hill neighborhood, and that's why one of the reasons I'm here. We looked at the absentee landlords under the definition that we have, and we have 505 absentee landlords in the Hill section. Can you believe that? As far away as California. You know, so, I mean, some of them care about their properties, But the majority do not care about the properties. All they do is care about collecting the rent. That's why we have so much blight in the hills section. We have to do something to address it. And like I said, 3 inspectors is not enough to address it. You know, you have over 30,000 units in the city of Scranton, and you cannot address it. One quick question. 6A, Mr. McGough. That, what Mr. Jackwitz talked about?
Let me go back.
You said $10,000 from Allied Services?
Yeah.
That's depleted, isn't it?
I'm sorry?
That's depleted. That money's gone, expended. They got that in July, the Bureau of Recreation spent that in July for swimming. I don't know why you're putting that, why you're doing that right now, unless you're gonna do it for
This
next year,
came-
hopefully that you're gonna get some money.
This came from the administration. I'm assuming that there is money to deposit in that account, or they're creating the account so that if there is further donations, they can
I
be
hope
placed
so, I
there.
hope that's the reason. Thank you.
Lee Morgan?
Good evening, Council. I brought a couple right-to-knows with me today, and I guess I'll give them to the clerk today, and someday next week I'll come and get a copy and be time-stamped, and I guess we'll go from there. The first question I have is the number of city-owned parking garages, the cost of each one to construct, the funding source, loans, grants for each one, and state or federal funds used. Okay, that's one. The other one is, who authorized the removal of the cages from Naog Park? You know, who authorized it? Where did the steel go? And if it was scrapped, who authorized that? Because I really think we need to know who told somebody it was all right to go in and remove steel from a city-owned property, and if somebody gave authorization for that, or if the recreational authority did it without authorization. I think something really needs to be done about that. I think we've ignored too many things for too long in the city. And the other question I have is the cost of construction of the Scranton Sewer Authority, the source of the funding, and the cost of construction of the collection system from homes and businesses to the treatment plant. Because I think that all these are very valid questions, and since they're a right-to-know request, maybe instead of asking questions and never getting an answer, maybe we can move forward here, because I am very sincere when I said last week that I want this council to cut the budget by 30%. I'm also very sincere on everything that I've ever said from this podium. And I just think that we need to find a whole new way of thinking in this city if there's going to be anything left of this city in the future. Mr. Quinn, with all due respect to Mr. Quinn, we're talking about absentee landlords. I think that if somebody was going to do a little research, they'd find out that when you go to the magistrate and you get a judgment from the magistrate, you can't collect it, because the state representatives and the state senate and the governor haven't enacted laws making it possible for you to collect. Because to be quite honest with you, when you follow the whole process out to the end, all the person has to do is file bankruptcy and you can't collect anything. So when you talk about absentee landlords, you know what? Absentee landlords aren't the problem in this city, like I said last week. People are happy to have people come invest in the town and buy rental properties. But when you can't collect rent from tenants, and to illustrate that, you just have to go to the North Scranton project, because they got 30 vouchers signed over to them. They weren't going to proceed with that project at North Scranton Junior High School unless the state and the government financed it, and then they wanted proof that the state or the federal government was going to pay the rent for the people that were going to live there. And I think the real problem here is the people who own rental properties have been put in such a disadvantage for decades that they can't conduct business in this city. And the last question I have here today, and I asked this the other day on that Steve Corbett's radio show, where are the city's neighborhood groups when we're in such a dire strait here, when we're discussing what we're going to sell and how we're going to proceed forward. And to be really honest with you, they should be here. And I mean, if they're hoping that they can smooth their way into a grant or some kind of community development money, okay, that politics has cost the city a lot over a long period of time. That's got to end. There is no community development money because we have to pay back the feds all the money we owe them for the money we misspent. And I just think that, you know, it's really time for this whole city to realize that everything has to change. Not just some things, everything. Okay, if we're going to survive and Scranton is going to be something in the future, we have to get our house in order. And as far as, you know, we're talking about in the newspaper anyhow about negotiating with city employees to get them to make it possible for the city to survive. You know something? If I was a city policeman, a fireman, DPW clerical worker, I'd have to ask myself, why am I going to give up my pension because the people we elected didn't do their job? Should I go into retirement with half of my pension because the people we elected didn't do their job and put the city in bankruptcy or close to it? The only thing that's stopping the city from going into receivership or bankruptcy is this council and the mayor. And that's all that stopped it previously. And if you can't cut the budget by 30% and you can't start to change the things that need to be changed, we need to change something else. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan.
Excuse me, Mr. McGough, right to know requests need to be submitted to the BA's office?
I'm sorry?
The right to know requests need to be submitted to the BA's office, to the right to know officer. Can't be responsible for processing right to know requests. That needs to go to the right to know officer?
You can submit your questions, right to knows, to the BA's office.
Well, no, I will do that, but I thought that quite possibly the council would like to know what's happening in our city, since we can't get answers to any of our...
Mr. Morgan, thank you.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Bob Wallace?
Thank you.
Good evening, Council. Bob Wallace, Scranton. I'm trying to go through a few things as fast as I can, and I'm going to bring up some of the issues from last week. I don't come here to waste my breath and waste my time and energy. I come here because I care about Scranton, and I'm proud to say I'm a Scrantonian. I'm not proud of what's been happening in this city and where it's heading. And I didn't appreciate comments that were made last week, and I'm going to address them. Mr. Gahan, and don't take it personal, I heard you about the Gahan Code of Ethics. Well, let's talk about ethics for a quick moment. Let's talk about when the university was going to tear the YMCA or the YW down. Mr. McGough worked for the university. He didn't recuse himself, and that's his choice. Mr. Wexler worked in a plant. It wasn't his choice, but he worked in a plant that illegal aliens were taken out of. He was the plant manager. You say he violated ethics? Mr. Evans sells real estate. He's got to make a deal wherever he can. That's his bread and butter. So if a guy wanted to build in Scranton, he says, no, I got a better deal out here because it's less taxes or something. You're going to challenge his ethics? You don't go to a school board meeting and challenge them over raises, pay raises for teachers, or higher pensions that are killing us with the tax base. Is that ethical? What about Mr. Rogan? He got criticized by everybody, blasted in every direction. I'm proud to say I know him because he tried to make a business deal that he was entitled to make, like anybody else would make. Yet he was man enough to give it up. He didn't take anything from the city. To the contrary, the city took it from him. So let's not talk about who's ethical and unethical here. What's unethical is where Scranton is right now today. Mr. McGough said that it's a Herculean task for us to put a casino in downtown Scranton. And he's right. You're darn right it's a Herculean task. It's a major task. But to put a Herculean task by the past councils and the administrators in this city to put Scranton where it is today, to put us on the verge of destruction. It was Herculean, you're darn right it was. It was political, and a lot of it was unethical. What I'm looking here, they accomplished that task. Look where we are today. I'm turning around and asking, is it a Herculean task, Mr. McGough, or any council member, to pick up this ballpoint and ink a letter with your signature to the legislators in our state, in our government, to ask them to go to the gaming board to create a casino license and a resort license for downtown Scranton at the Steamtown Mall? Is that a Herculean task to do? Is that going to break somebody's hand? I want you to understand something. Don't lose sleep over who will lose or get the license. I'm not putting a license in my name, even though I probably could if I wanted to, because it was created for one felon, it could be created for another. So let's get that on the table. I can assure you one thing, it won't be you or the other leaders that are going to put a dime and lose sleep over it. It's our investment that we're putting here. It's an investment we want to put in to save the city. Not everybody can be as fortunate as you that we could go to various casinos and patronize them, as you said last week. A lot of people can't do that, and that's your choice, okay? The bottom line is, this is about the city of Scranton. We're looking to invest our capital into this city. Don't worry about who's going to get the license. Worry about what's going to give this city where it's going. Stop worrying about what the casinos you patronize right now. Worry about what you can patronize in this city and Lackawanna County. Forget about Monroe County. Forget about Luzerne County. Concern yourselves about this city, this county. This is where we live. We're giving you the opportunity to do something and do it right for the first time in a long time around here. So take a Herculean task, take a vitamin, pick up a pen, and send a letter to the legislators. It's not that hard to do. And that's what I'm asking here today. Because Scranton's doomed otherwise. I'm going to give you something real quick on another note. I'm going to give you some information here on the landfill. If I may.
Please. Thank you.
Just briefly, I presented this information to Troop and Dunmore Councils the other night. What you have before you is what's going into the landfill. You have a certified report from a laboratory of the chemicals being deposited in the Keystone landfill. This concerns each and every one of us from a health standpoint. You can read it, you can see it's there. You won't read it in the paper, but I presented this to DEP at a public meeting. I'm concerned about the fact that 2 million ton of unregistered waste, unpermitted waste, is going to be removed from that landfill, moved somewhere else, that over the years, you name it, it went in it before anything was ever permitted. There's still 1 million ton underneath there that's still going to sit in that landfill. We want core samples taken right through what's in there before anything is moved, and down below it to see what's transpired into our system. These are created into airborne carcinogens that we breathe in here. Forget about your water supply. Think about the dust that flows from that landfill. The higher it gets, the more dust is going to come in here. It's pulverized by equipment in there. It's commingled. You take each container going in there with every bit of chemical coming in out of the Marcella. You're turning around, you put it in a volume, you got some serious issues. That's what this shows you. It's something that we're asking the city of Scranton to intervene and look into, because this is our town too. And the last thing I'm going to give you briefly, some information that helps you make some money.
Mr. Bolus,
1 second, Mr. McGough. I took a second to give you the papers. This is to the benefit of you and the city. This is to take the Scranton Sewer Authority, both in Troop and in Scranton, and do some conversions with money and start cleaning and recycling the water from the Marcella Shale up there, and do the recycling to put it back there and turn it into millions of dollars to help this city. Don't let it all waste in the landfill.
Thank you.
Use that for something we need to get the city out of debt, and don't blow it off so easy. Thank you.
Doug Miller?
Good evening, Doug Miller, Scranton. Before I get into the brunt of what I came here for this evening, I just think it's kind of troubling in a city that's facing tough financial times. When we have a citizen come forward and ask its government to get answers to questions, and we have an inability to submit that request on behalf of a citizen, I think that really just is very discouraging. And I understand this idea that it goes to the VA's office, but why the Office of City Council can't submit a request on behalf of a citizen is beyond me. I've submitted requests in the past, the previous council gave it to the city clerk, the office staff, and it was never an issue. And I just think it goes to show how the times have changed in the way this office is run, and I think it's really unfortunate. And that if this council was really committed to getting real hardcore answers, there shouldn't be an issue. What's it going to take, 5 minutes, not even, to send a few pieces of paper upstairs? It just baffles me. My first question this evening is in regards to the elevator situation. Simple question. Where's the money coming from? How are we paying for it? Do we know?
It's in the capital budget, I believe.
It's in the capital budget, and the capital budget's more of a wish list, so is fixing the elevator more of a wish list project, or do we have concrete documentation?
I don't
showing
have
how
it
much
in
the
front of me, Mr. Miller, so I can't say for sure.
Well, I think that's an important question. We're talking about making a repair, and yet we don't know the cost. It just doesn't seem to make sense. Last week, Mr. McGough, you had stated that you will be conducting weekly meetings with the administration, particularly the mayor, to discuss the critical issues facing the city. And another question this evening to you would be, have you at this time, or do you plan on having any discussions with the mayor in regards to the potential sale of the parking garages?
That's been an ongoing process.
Okay. And kind of continuing along that path, has there been any discussion as to an alternative solution rather than selling off another asset? Has there been any discussion as to maybe reaching out to the banking community and considering possibly refinancing some of that debt so that the city doesn't sell off another asset and we lose potential revenue in the city?
The Business Administration Office has been in an ongoing process dealing with all things parking,
Okay.
and all avenues are being investigated.
Has this council had discussion? I understand the business administrator has discussions on a daily basis, but has this council in general had discussions with the administration on exploring alternative solutions to the parking garages?
I've been at many of the meetings, same meetings as the business administrator.
And have you had discussions with the business
Yes, we've
administrator?
spoken.
And you've discussed alternative solutions?
I said all investigations.
I guess that's the best I'm going to get. But I think that if we
What you want me to
explore
tell you.
other alternatives, rather than getting the runaround, as we do on a frequent basis, we need to get down to the heart of the matter. And the idea of selling another asset is just an absurdity. And, Mr. Wexler, as the finance chair, I'd have to ask, if in the last 7 months, have you spearheaded any dialogue with the administration, not even just on the parking authority, but just in the city financial situation in general?
Yes, I have met with the business administrator several times.
And I certainly appreciate that. And I think that, more creativity and discussion needs to take place. The idea that we want to follow a plan brought forward by Mr. Amoroso, I'm not really interested in Mr. Amoroso's plan, because we've already determined that that plan's only going to kill this city. And I just don't understand, and this would be a question I would pose to this council tonight, is why is it in the city's best interest to sell parking garages at such a discounted rate? And who determined that these parking garages were worth the alleged $21 to $22 million? Does anybody know that? Who determined their value?
There was a 2012 study done in which they were evaluated. In order to go through a process at this time, there would have to be another monetization of the parking authorities looked at. Plus, the value is always in the supply and demand, let's say. What is it that people are willing to offer for them?
Well, I just, what really, the bottom line, and that's sort of where I'd like to get down to, is the bottom line is, you owe $50 million allegedly on these parking garages, and you want to potentially sell them for $22 million and then leave the taxpayers holding that $31 million bag. Does that really make sense? I just don't think it does. And I do think drastic cuts need to be made in the 2015 operating budget, between 30 to 35% worth of cuts. And if we have an inability to do that, then I do think we need to explore the idea of bringing in a receiver and possibly exploring a bankruptcy petition. And I, in the past, was never one to really go down that road, but we've gone to that point. And I intend to spend between now and November 15th, and I am going to propose cuts myself, along with other concerned individuals.
Thank you.
And we intend on proposing those to this council, because tough decisions need to be made. And if we
Thank
don't
you,
do
Mr.
something
Miller.
about it now, if this council isn't willing to stop playing politics, then the city's finished. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to address council?
Andy Sprague, Citizen Scranton, fellow Scrantonians. You made a comment last meeting where you would allow people from outside the city to come and speak before you. Well, I've been speaking before you for over a decade, and it hasn't done a darn thing. Then people should get representation on the pension board. That's where they need to be. If you're going to collect money for a commuter tax, they should be allowed to be on that pension board. Some way, somehow. That's the most fairest thing to do. Then they know what's happening. Coming here to speak before you wouldn't do too much. I can tell you that now. Like I said, for a decade we've been speaking, and the only thing we got was ridicule. But the trouble is, we were telling the truth. And for some reason, you didn't want to accept the truth. We had people that looked at things a lot different than people that had to pay for the things they were looking at. We got a lot of garages that we didn't need, but nobody went back and see who recommended all these garages. Why were they all built? Remember, that was brought up before the last council was seated. Somebody mentioned maybe we should hold the person who recommended all these things accountable for some of their recommendations if they were paid for them. But that fell on deaf ears too. I once asked, when we lent our money to Boscoff, the last payment, did we lend it to the Scranton Mall partners or to Mr. Boscoff himself? If the money was given to the mall partners, then I suggest you look for a legal ramification, because they had no intention to pay off the bond. You know that, and I know that. But still, you were silent. You were silent too many times. You were silent for the Hilton, when millions was lost at the Hilton. And there was no reason for that money to be lost in the Hilton, because they wanted to come before you to subordinate our loan. That was the most stupidest thing council ever did. But whoever said council was real brilliant. We wouldn't be in this position if they were. Now I know the new members are stuck. You're just stuck, it came before you. When I came before you, when you were seated, I told you, the only thing you can expect is higher taxes. That's it. There is no solution. The unions don't have to give up a darn thing. Not a thing. Because the contract is set for 3 years. So they have to they have to be willing to open the contract. Now, are you willing to give up your $12,500 for $800, $900, $1,000? You're not going to go backwards. The unions are not going backwards. Their motto is forward, not backwards. The things that were done is over the last 30 or 40 years, that's when it was all done. Like I said before, when a person was making $1.10 an hour, all them little perks made sense. But when the average city workers makes twice the average pay of the a person that works in the city, The paper said 23,000. That's the average pay for a worker in the city. Now you look at the firemen, policemen, and so forth, and they're almost twice as much, plus all the other perks that go with it. And this is the things that are is. Now, how you can correct it, I doubt it. But Mr. Boas did make sense. Maybe there is a possibility you could apply for an auxiliary permit, a casino license, run by either Mohegan or up there at Mr. Thing place up there, Mount Airy. I keep getting up there too. Mount Airy and the Mohegans. But maybe one of them would go for an auxiliary. Wilkes-Barre Luzerne County just got $12.5 million from the casino. We're nowhere near that, getting it from Monroe. And that money even goes to all the existing counties up there that is adjacent to it. Now, an auxiliary license may be. Standalone license, I doubt. Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening, Council. Marie Schumacher. Last week's vote on 7B has been haunting me all week. I did a right to know, and I found out that those 3 advertisings cost $872.95 just to advertise that. Now, when according to you and the administration, the ordinance rammed through last week was unnecessary. Therefore, if it was not necessary, there could not have been an emergency. So that was a false document to allow you to ram through the ordinance in one evening. That's a lot of waste for a city significantly in the red. To paraphrase a Yiddish proverb, a dollar is a lot of money if you have not got a dollar. Back in April, you tried to convince the public and yourselves, I believe, that it was critical that we had to spend $40,000 more than the offer of the lowest bidder for the service of a city engineer. This flagrant spending has got to stop. I do not know how you are able to sleep nights when you do not save every dollar possible while telling us you're going to raise property taxes 18% on top of a massive increase in the past several years. It's time more attention was given to collecting the monies already owed to the city than spending money when it is, in your own words, not necessary. I'll have more on this during the 2015 budget discussions. And now I want to move to the tonight's appointments, specifically 7A, B, and E, D and E. The Scranton Parking Authority met on the 2nd of September, and I would believe that the decisions, any decisions they made that night are null and void, as the council had not approved any of these appointments at the time of that meeting. 7A is one that is being backdated to 8/11. B was empty as of 8/6, so that one was sort of okay. But D expired on 6/1, June 1st. That could have been taken. That's either sloppy administration or who knows what. But those people were not legitimate members of the board, and now you're going back. If I'm delinquent on a tax, could I backdate my check to avoid penalties and interest? I don't think so. So it makes sense that you guys should not be allowed to backdate stuff either. If it's wrong for government, it is wrong for government to afford itself privileges that are not afforded to the general public and the citizens you represent. Now, on 7E, Dominic Giorgetti of the same address was appointed chair of the Civil Service Commission for the duration of Mayor Courtwright's term back, I believe it was February 2nd or 20, anyway, back in February. Is this the person who is also being seeking a Scranton Sewer Authority position as well? If yes, will he continue to hold both positions, or will he be giving up the Civil Service Commission? I'd like to know that. Then also, last week I'd asked if the court approves the commuter tax, how many more years will it buy us in being able to pay the pensions we currently owe? Mr. Evans, were you able to get that information? You're the new finance chair. The number of years that $5 million in the commuter tax, if it's approved, will keep the pension fund solvent?
I didn't get the exact amount. I think that the Auditor General's report has, he's looking at 3 to 5 years. I don't think it makes much difference, the $5 million, but I'll verify the exact amount.
Thank you.
We certainly need more than that. I think we're looking at the $12 million payment this year.
Okay. So. And then on 3B tonight, I know those numbers look rather healthy because they're comparing 2013 numbers, 2013 collections to 2014 collections when you had big tax increases in the property tax. But I would also like to know how those track to our cash flow projections on everything that's collected. Okay, I will be back next week, good Lord willing, and I haven't forgotten you, Mr. Rogan. I'll be back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council. Dave Dobson, resident. Taxes paid, fees paid. Now, over the last couple months, over this commuter tax, I've seen several articles in the Scranton Times on letters to the editor about how we have volunteer fire companies and such, and we don't have to pay taxes such as this. And these people should start to keep in mind volunteer fire company losses. Swayersville, $700,000 was pilfered out of their funds. Music, over $300,000 was pilfered out of their funds. And years back, I had a person that was literally pestered into psychiatric counseling because he couldn't live up to his job as an uncompensated EMT and show up for chicken barbecues or whatever and help out all day with that too. And Oliphant now, we had that fire at Scranton Cooperage with all that dye and all that stuff, and apparently they had some kind of salt that helps to start fires, so they've been back there 4 times. They said they're not returning again. So my proposition or supposition is that someday volunteer fire companies are going to fall by the wayside, and rightfully so. Kane Street project, does anybody know if that has anything to do with the pipeline damage that was inflicted from the gas line from the landfill in Taylor? I mean, Kane Street was a scream for years, but I certainly hope that once again we weren't bamboozled by somebody making a lot of money, digging up a street, making a mess out of it, turning a fantastic profit, and leaving us with the holding the bag. My compliments on 5C and D. It's way past due that we start to get some kind of collections. And once again, I'd like to mention that some of these companies or organizations should be steering people towards possibly paying up with a reverse mortgage. Do you really want to be put out of your house someday? I just heard a story about somebody that didn't pay their taxes. I don't know why, but they have till September 30th to move. I think it's down on Hickory Street. It's right near us, Wayne, so they're out of there as of September 30th. They didn't pay trash fees, they didn't pay, I don't know what it was all about. They know what their finances, might have been medical bills, might have been buying 20 lottery tickets a day. Who knows, you know? So much for casinos. I'd also like to remind people in town that we have some severe fraud going on with selling secondary sales of electrical service. These companies have more copper in the phone wires going into their office than they own in generating power or supplying power or delivering power. There's 350 organizations or companies that are selling electricity on a so-called competitive basis, and the PUC is doing nothing about it. They're basically a fraud. My suggestion is, when they call you, use the appropriate foul language, because they called you. Be abusive and hang up on them, because you'll get swamped with 50 and 60% or 600%, 500 and 600% some people are paying on a variable rate for electricity. It's just ungodly, and I have the article right here. I passed it to you a few weeks ago, all of you, and it's basically nothing. The whole energy situation is nothing but a fraud. And finally, another buyer beware. I have to read this article. Somebody was kind enough to pass it to me. Pennsylvania sales and use tax. Restaurant industry alone, $922 million in revenue that the state of Pennsylvania is being cheated out of on an annual basis. $922 million. So if somebody tells you that increased sales taxes, well, we better straighten them out before we increase them. And one final note, on the taxpayers, we had a conference on the river with Bernie McGurl, and he's a river activist, and if you can catch it on ECTV sometime, try and watch it, because it will show you a lot of the concerns with what we're faced with the river, and I certainly don't want to see the sewer plant monsterized, but there's a big road ahead. Thank you, and have a good night.
Anyone else who wishes to address council?
Fifth order, 5A, motions.
Mr. Wexler?
Thank you, President McGough. A few things tonight. The first thing I'd like to talk about is to thank and congratulate the first responders, including the fire department, police, ambulance, Red Cross people, and volunteers from the neighborhood who responded to the fire on Stafford Avenue on Sunday morning. You know, being familiar with that neighborhood, that could have been a much worse problem than it was, and once again, I'd like to congratulate everyone that was involved with that. In regards to the news about Goodwill that was in the paper this week, City Council has sent a letter to the county requesting that they support Goodwill's application for those transfers. We're at the point now where we have to do whatever we can to move that Goodwill project along, and if this helps that, I'm all in favor of it. Last week there were some questions asked about the SAFER grants. I spoke to Captain Lucas today about that. The SAFER grant money for 2014 has, for the most part, been received and is going to cover the amount of money targeted for that amount this year. In terms of where we are, in terms of going forward, to date, the July was the proposed announcement of the applications, and that has not happened yet. As a result, I believe that the city should be preparing for no SAFER grants for next year's budget. That would require us to propose funding required to keep at least 126 firemen working, and that would have to come out of our budget. If money becomes available, we'll be ahead of the game, but I think this is the practice that's been used in the past, where we kind of budgeted by wish. I think going forward, we have to start to budget by fact. We did speak on, tonight in the caucus, the garbage tax bills were due, the final payments were due on September 1st. There is a grace period until September 30th for people to pay those bills. I would like to see or find out what attempts the city makes to collect those taxes before the end of the year. I am a bit concerned that once the state passes, these delinquent garbage bills go somewhere else, and they're kind of forgotten about. Next year, when the bills are mailed out, it's only the bill for 2015, and there's no reference to the prior balances that people may owe. I think there's a lot of people that pay the first half, put the bill in the drawer, and forget the second half. There's people that think, since I didn't pay it, I'm just going to take my chances. So I would like to see some more aggressive collecting of those taxes before the end of the year. In regard to some of the points that were brought up tonight, in terms of the neighborhood groups, I hard to stomach criticism of the neighborhood groups. The neighborhood groups are out there working. They're not coming to council to speak. They're out there supporting their neighborhoods. The walking around money that was around when I was the president up at the East Mountain Residents Association, we got a lot of money from walking around money. That's not available anymore. Any monies that these neighborhoods have, for the most part, has been developed by their hard work. They do participate in some grants, but it's hard work and volunteerism. And I don't think that they have to be here at City Council to show that they're supporting the city and doing their best. I would welcome them to come. I would like to hear them come and speak. I attend a lot of the meetings, a lot of professionalism there, a lot of commitment, and a lot of success, independent of the city. I'd like to mention about the casino. I don't have any problem supporting the casino, but my biggest problem is right now, looking in downtown Scranton, I'm very, very concerned that the casino put in the Steamtown Mall would dry up any of the small restaurants and bars that are currently available down there. I think a casino may have the result of the people go in there and never come out. So I am very nervous of that. I'm not opposed to the idea, but I would have to be sold that it would not hurt the downtown people. And just one comment about the citizen who wanted us to submit their Right to Know Act. Over the past couple of weeks, we've heard a lot about standard operating procedures. I'm all in favor of it. My career has been based on writing standard operating procedures and evaluating their success. The procedure for this is to present it to the BA's office and to the Right to Know office. I can see a problem where if we accept this and for somehow it's not done in a timely fashion or it's not submitted correctly, that the request is not answered. So, like I said, I agree with everybody that talks about SOPs, and the SOP for this is to submit it to the business administrator. That's all I have. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. A few items, and first, this is one that Mr. McGough mentioned during our opening prayer, that today is September 11th, and we certainly need to remember all of the police officers, firefighters, and EMTs that rushed into those buildings when the rest of us were rushing out, and to remember to keep them in our prayers, as well as the troops that are overseas, as it looks that we may be engaging in more military action overseas. Now on to some city business. We did receive a letter from PennDOT following up the letter that we sent regarding Kaiser Avenue and Dalton Street. In summary, the letter states that they're writing in response to our correspondence regarding the trucks turning onto Dalton Street from Kaiser Avenue in Scranton. It says the department is evaluating whether modifications to the road can be done to try to accommodate larger vehicles. We are having our consultant look at the layout, and we will follow up with the findings. Very hopeful that PennDOT will be able to come to a resolution on this that could work for the business owners and the residents in that part of Scranton. Next, regarding, I believe it's one of the first items we're voting on for the CDBG allotments for this year. I just wanted to give a brief rundown of some of the highlights in these grant allotments as they currently stand. Now, the way the process will work is we will introduce this legislation tonight. Next week, there will be a public hearing, and then there will be a 30-day wait period where residents can give comments through OECD or through City Council at the podium if they wish. The first item I want to talk about is one of the most popular parts of the CDBG allotment. That's the neighborhood police patrol. That's currently being budgeted for $300,000. With the $300,000 allocation will fund the 3 officers we currently have through the neighborhood police patrols and 1 additional officer. It says the neighborhood police patrol officers will continue to be on foot and or bicycles. The neighborhood police patrol will be assigned to solely neighborhoods that qualify for expenditures of federal monies under the new 2010 census data that became effective July 1st, 2014. And as we learned when previous Mayor Doherty cut the police department, these officers cannot be used to fill cuts on the city end. So the city regular police patrol must be at 140 officers. Any reduction below that amount would forbid us from being able to use these funds. The second item, which is another very popular item, reconstruction of roads, paving, including handicap curb cuts. Scranton has reviewed the new 2010 census data, and the administration is requesting that $630,500 to be allocated for the reconstruction of roads to include handicap curb cuts. OECD will look at streets that were not previously eligible to include them on the potential paving list. One of the issues with using CDBG money for paving is it can only be used in certain areas that are deemed by the federal government to be low to moderate income. So it does restrict where those funds can be used. But because of the new census that came out, there have been changes. So they will be looking at some possible areas that weren't in low to moderate in the past census that may be on that list now. Number 3, and these are just the highlights, not the entire package. Number 3 is a new pumper engine for Station 7. A new pumper/engine for Station 7 will be purchased. The $100,000 will be the down payment for the fire truck. The city will pay for the rest of the truck over time. So that's certainly an improvement. I know from speaking to members of the fire department that there is much investment that needs to be made in equipment for the fire department. So that is a piece of good news there as well. The home program. The City of Scranton Housing Rehabilitation Program, previously funded through NeighborWorks, will now be implemented through OECD. Currently, OECD is redesigning the program and looking for an inspection service to provide assistance. The administration is requesting $175,000 for this program. Lackawanna Neighbors, be $0 through the CDBG funding and $75,000 through the home program. OECD determined due to the decrease in CDBG program funding, Lackawanna Neighbors would only be funded through the home program for housing purchase, rehabilitation, lead abatement, and the resale in the amount of $75,000. After the completion of the rehabilitation, the home will be sold to an income-eligible applicant under Scranton's homebuyer program. The homes will be located anywhere within the city of Scranton. Number 6, administration, fair housing analysis. In 2015, Scranton is required to prepare a fair housing analysis. OECD has made it a policy that every 5 years when Scranton submits its 5-year consolidated plan to HUD, the city will prepare a fair housing analysis. This is an administrative expense that will cost approximately $20,000. Under the home program, Scranton is allowed 10% of the allocation to go towards administration. As you can see, the $20,000 for the fair housing analysis, and the other $20,000 will go towards running the home program. And finally, this is demolition of blighted and abandoned properties throughout the city of Scranton. That line item currently is proposed at $200,000 for this year. And actually one more that I forgot to mention. The Novembrino pool, which is one that has been talked about much at these meetings. The children, West Side being the biggest part of the city and the children not having a pool over there. The project is being funded currently at $220,000. This project will eliminate a current unusable pool and rehab this space by adding a public park complex, retrofit and expansion of the current pump house to include restrooms and provide more safety and security features. I'm sure that there will be much more discussion of these items as we move forward, but I just wanted to announce these today. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Last week during motions, I mentioned that I'd like to see Don King and possibly City Planning Commission take a look at the cell tower zoning code, and I'm not sure what the procedure is to make that happen. Do we send them a letter? Do we call them? Do I request the administrator? You'll contact them? Okay. All right. Tonight I'd like to talk a little bit about tax-exempt properties. Another key component of the Omarosa plan. In the plan, the stated goal is to increase pilot payments to $1.5 million by the year 2015. This can be in the form of money into the general fund or possibly in the form of services or specific projects such as infrastructure improvements or public safety or a combination of those components. But before those discussions with our nonprofits can begin, I think a better understanding of their tax-exempt status is important. A purely public charity is tax-exempt for purposes of local real estate taxes under the Pennsylvania Constitution. However, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, as a result of a court case in 1985, created what is called the HUB test to determine whether a nonprofit organization is to be treated as such a charity. It should also be noted that each and every parcel that a nonprofit owns must meet those requirements as well. The 5-part HUB test is as follows. Number 1, they need to advance a charitable purpose. 2, donate or render gratuitously a substantial portion of their services. 3, benefit a substantial and indefinite class of persons who are legitimate subjects of charity. 4, relieve the government of some of its burden. And 5, operate entirely free from profit motive. While I don't dispute that our nonprofit property owners more than likely meet all of those requirements, I am less confident that every parcel that they may own would meet those standards. A particular property might not qualify for a real estate property exemption if the property is not actually and regularly used for the purposes of that institution. Ownership of a property is not the sole determiner of taxable status. The use of the property must be in support of the purpose or mission of the tax-exempt institution. So therefore, it's a very real possibility that one may find a certain property owned by a purely public charity to be liable for real estate taxes if the property is not used to advance the purpose of the institution in question. Also, governing bodies, like the City of Scranton, or Scranton School District, or any other governing body, always has the ability to appeal assessments to the local appeals board to determine if correctly the tax-exempt status in question is proper. To that end, a progressive county in western Pennsylvania has begun a parcel-by-parcel review of all tax-exempt properties in their county. They sent a letter to every property owner that has tax-exempt parcels as a purely public charity. The property owners have given a deadline to provide the county with an application explaining how they qualify for tax-exempt status under the HUB test for each individual parcel. And of course, this process is still ongoing. Other progressive county governments created internal policies that dictated that when any property is transferred to new ownership, that property was automatically made taxable, despite who the seller or the buyer was. This then allowed the nonprofit to make their case before an appeals board as to why that parcel should now be tax exempt. This simple policy change could have a dramatic impact on the taxing bodies affected. Those are several things, again, that our state reps and state senator could look into on our behalf as statewide solutions to the inconsistencies that county governments choose to deal with in their dealings with nonprofits. As the finance chair for Scranton City Council, if it is appropriate, I would offer my services and commitment to join the administration in any discussions with our purely public charities. Thank you.
Mr. Gahn?
Yes, thank you.
Council received correspondence from OECD regarding CDBG funds used for the 2014 paving project throughout the city. American Asphalt Paving Company was the lowest bidder in the amount of $791,000. A pre-construction meeting will be held on September 17th. The notice to proceed date is September 22nd, and paving should be completed by October 31st of this year, depending upon weather conditions. I have a list of the streets. It's a little lengthy, but they will be paving in Pine Brook, the Weston Field section, North Scranton, and West Scranton. So it's a good project, and I'm sure the residents of those neighborhoods will be glad to see streets paved. Last week I mentioned that council had received a letter from residents of the Geneva House on Adams Avenue regarding a request for a new emergency exit only, no parking sign, and their concerns over people illegally parking in front of the emergency exit. Council received a quick response from Chief Graziano. They took care of the problem along with DPW Director Denny Gallagher. So on behalf of council, I'd like to thank them for that, and I know the elderly residents of the Geneva House are grateful for the quick response, because that was a major issue. Last week, I had requested that the process for residents requesting a street light in their neighborhood be published on the city's website. Mrs. Reed was in contact with our IT department, who put it on the main page this week, and we thank them very much for that. There is a vacant lot on the corner across from the Veterans Center on Pittston Avenue that is overgrown weeds and grass and looks like it hasn't been maintained in quite some time. It's a real eyesore. The address is 929 Pittston Avenue. I was contacted by neighbors who would like to see it cleaned up. Our office will be forwarding this concern to our licensing, inspections, and permits department, which I also should say is doing a good job getting to these complaints and concerns from neighbors. And that is all I have this week. Thank you.
And I would like to reiterate that council meetings will continue to be held on Thursday nights, 6:30 in council chambers until further notice. When we receive information as to the renovations of the elevator and when that will take place, notice will be given as to where and when council meetings will be held. That's all. Thank you.
5B for introduction and ordinance authorizing the mayor and other appropriate officials of the city of Scranton to take all necessary actions to implement the consolidated submission for community planning and development programs to be funded under the Community Development Block Grant Program, Home Investment Partnership Program, and Emergency Solutions Grants Program for the period beginning January 1, 2015.
At this time, I'll entertain a motion that item 5B be introduced into its proper committee.
So moved.
Second.
On the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, and so moved.
5C for introduction and ordinance approving penalty, interest, and fee schedule for collection of delinquent refuse fees.
At this time, I'll entertain a motion that item 5C be introduced into its proper committee.
So moved.
Second.
On the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, and so moved.
5D for introduction and ordinance authorizing the mayor and other appropriate officials of the city of Scranton to execute and enter into a third addendum to the professional services contract with Northeast Revenue Services, LLC, for the collection of delinquent taxes, to expand the collection services performed by Northeast Revenue Services to include the collection of delinquent annual occupancy license and parking lot operator fees.
At this time, I'll entertain a motion that item 5D be introduced into its proper committee.
So moved.
Second.
On the question.
Yes,
Yes.
Mr. McGough.
Oh, sorry, Joe, go ahead.
Before final passage of this, I would just like us to do some further investigation into if any of these fees can be collected by the single tax office.
Yes, on the question, I was talking to Bill Fox, our tax collector, today, and he feels strongly that their office can do this work. So I agree with Councilman Wexler that we have 2 readings left, so by the final vote, we will try to iron that out and find out if it makes more sense to just have the single tax office collect those delinquent fees.
Anyone else? All those in favor of introduction signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, and so moved.
5E for introduction, a resolution ratifying and approving of the execution and submission of the grant application by the City of Scranton Police Department to the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development for a local share account grant, Monroe County, in the amount of $180,000 for the Scranton Police Department to fund the completion of Phase 2 of the Community Surveillance Network project, authorizing the mayor and other appropriate city officials to accept the grant if successful, coordinating and dispersing the grant funds for Phase 2 of the Community Surveillance Network project.
At this time, I'll entertain a motion that item 5E be introduced into its proper committee.
So moved.
Second.
On the question, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, and so moved.
5F for introduction, a resolution ratifying and approving of the execution and submission of the grant application by the City of Scranton Department of Public Works to the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development for a local share account grant, Monroe County, in the amount of $625,417 for the Department of Public Works to fund the completion of Phase 2 of the Kane Street project, authorizing the mayor and other appropriate city officials to accept the grant if successful, coordinating and dispersing the grant funds for Phase 2 of the Kane Street project.
At this time, I'll entertain a motion that item 5F be introduced into its proper committee.
So moved.
Second.
On the question,
Yes, on the question, I just want to say that I fully support this grant application, and I hope that we do get the grant, because as someone who lives in Manuka and travels this area often, in fact, when I was first on council, many of the complaints that I got was about Kane Street, and it really is in awful condition. I wouldn't even consider it a road at this point. So I hope that we can get this money, and appreciate the administration submitting this grant and trying to take care of this problem.
all those in favor of introduction signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, and so moved.
5G for introduction, a resolution ratifying and approving of the execution and submission of the grant application by the City of Scranton on behalf of the Everhart Museum to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, acting through the Commonwealth Financing Authority for a local share account grant pursuant to the Pennsylvania Racehorse Development and Gaming Act in the amount of $300,000 for the project to be known as Everhart Museum Safety Infrastructure Project located in Scranton, Pennsylvania, authorizing the mayor and other appropriate city officials of the City of Scranton to accept the grant if successful and execute and enter into a local share account grant contract and commitment letter with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to accept and utilize the grant in the amount of $300,000 awarded by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for such project.
At this time, I'll entertain a motion that item 5G be introduced into its proper committee.
So moved.
Second.
On the question, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, and so moved.
5H for introduction, a resolution ratifying and approving of the execution and submission of the grant application by the City of Scranton Fire Department to the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development for a local share account grant, Monroe County, in the amount of $900,035 for the City of Scranton Fire Department to be used toward the purchase of a new KME 100-foot mid-mount aerial truck to replace a 2001 Ferrara truck, authorizing the mayor and other appropriate city officials to accept the grant if successful, coordinating and dispersing the grant funds toward the purchase of the new aerial truck.
At this time, I'll entertain a motion that item 5H be introduced into its proper committee.
So moved.
Second.
On the question, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, and so moved.
5I for introduction, a resolution authorizing the mayor and other appropriate city officials to execute and enter into a contract with A&M Electrical Construction Incorporated to provide maintenance of traffic signalization for the City of Scranton for the period of 1 year from September 1, 2014 through August 31, 2015.
At this time, I'll entertain a motion that item 5I be introduced into its proper committee.
So moved.
Second.
On the question, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, and so moved.
Sixth order, 6A, reading by title, filed with Council Number 42, 2014, and ordinance creating and establishing special city account number as noted entitled Free Swim for Citizens of Scranton for the receipt and disbursement of those funds received for this purpose.
At this time, excuse me. We're up to 6. You heard reading by title of item 6A. What is your pleasure?
I move that item 6A pass reading by title.
Second.
On the question, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Ayes have it, and so moved.
6B, reading by title, file of the council number 43, 2014, an ordinance designating the 500 block of Bogart Place as one-way designation westbound from Cedar Avenue to South Washington Avenue, approximately 430 linear feet.
You've heard reading by title of item 6B. What is your pleasure?
I move that item 6B pass reading by title.
Second.
On the question,
Yes, Mr. McGough, one question on this. A resident called and asked me, these one-ways, did there have to be a traffic study for this?
I think it was done,
Okay.
if I'm
Thank you.
not mistaken.
I think in the backup, from what Chief Graziano said, they did do a study. I could be wrong, but I think I remember seeing that.
I was, like one of the speakers, I was under the assumption this always was a one-way.
It was, the other way.
Right.
And then it became two-way somehow, because I think the sign got knocked down, and it became a two-way court, so.
And then I think
Yeah.
the pedestrian traffic increased, and that's what brought this whole thing about.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, and so moved.
Seventh order, 7A, for consideration by the Committee on Rules for Adoption, Resolution Number 71, 2014, appointment of Santa J. Corby, also known as Sandy Corby, 401 Williamsburg Lane, Scranton, Pennsylvania, 18504, as a member of the Board of the Scranton Parking Authority effective August 11, 2014. Mrs. Corby will be replacing Frank J. Tunis Jr., who was removed from the board by letter dated January 22, 2014. Mrs. Corby will fill the unexpired term of Frank J. Tunis Jr., whose term is scheduled to expire on June 1, 2017.
As Chair for the Committee on Rules, I recommend final passage of item 7A.
Second.
On the question, roll call, please.
Mr. Wexler?
Yes.
Mr. Rogan?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Gahn?
Yes.
Mr. McGough?
Yes. I hereby declare item 7A legally and lawfully adopted.
7B, for consideration by the Committee on Rules for Adoption, Resolution Number 72, 2014, appointment of Maureen McNichols, 551 North Hyde Park Avenue, Scranton, Pennsylvania, 18504, as a member of the Board of the Scranton Parking Authority effective August 11, 2014. Mrs. McNichols will be replacing Rosetta Walsh, who resigned effective August 5, 2014. Mrs. McNichols will fill the unexpired term of Rosetta Walsh, whose term is scheduled to expire on June 1, 2015.
As Chair for the Committee on Rules, I recommend final passage of item 7B.
Second.
On the question, roll call, please.
Mr. Wexler?
Yes.
Mr. Rogan?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Gahn?
Yes.
Mr. McGough?
Yes, I hereby declare item 7B legally and lawfully adopted.
7C, for consideration by the Committee on Rules for Adoption, Resolution Number 73, 2014, amending Resolution Number 1, 2014, entitled Adopting the Rules and Order of Business of the Scranton City Council, Scranton, Pennsylvania, by amending Article 3 Committees, Section 2 Standing Committees of the Council, and Section 3 Standing Subcommittees of the Council.
As Chair for the Committee on Rules, I recommend final passage of item 7C.
Second.
On the question, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, and so moved.
We'll need a roll call vote, Mr.
Oh, gee. I'm sorry. Roll call, please.
Mr. Wexler?
Yes.
Mr. Rogan?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Gahn?
Yes.
Mr. McGough?
Yes. I hereby declare item 7C legally and lawfully adopted. Sorry.
7D, for consideration by the Committee on Rules for Adoption, Resolution Number 74, 2014, reappointment of Michael Salerno, 1200 Bryn Mawr Street, Scranton, Pennsylvania, 18504, as a member of the Board of the Scranton Parking Authority for an additional 5-year term. Mr. Salerno's current term expired on June 1, 2014, and his new term will expire on June 1, 2019.
As Chair for the Committee on Rules, I recommend final passage of item 7D.
Second.
On the question, Roll call, please.
Mr. Wexler?
Yes.
Mr. Rogan?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Gahn?
Yes.
Mr. McGough?
Yes, I hereby declare item 7D legally and lawfully adopted.
7E for consideration by the Committee on Rules for Adoption, Resolution Number 75, 2014, appointment of Dominic Giorgetti, 3015 Pittston Avenue, Scranton, Pennsylvania 18505, as a member of the Board of the Scranton Sewer Authority, effective August 27, 2014. Mr. Giorgetti will be replacing Elizabeth Randall, who resigned on August 26, 2014. Mr. Giorgetti will fill the unexpired term of Elizabeth Randall, whose term is scheduled to expire on December 31, 2015.
I make a motion to amend item 7E per the following correction to read, whose term is scheduled to expire on December 31st, 2016.
Second on the question. All those in favor of the motion to amend 7E signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it and so moved. As Chair for the Committee on Rules, I recommend final passage of item 7E as amended.
Second.
On the question, roll call, please.
Mr. Wexler?
Yes.
Mr. Rogan?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Gahn?
Yes.
Mr. McGough?
Yes, I hereby declare item 7E legally and lawfully adopted.
7F for consideration by the Committee on Public Safety for Adoption, Resolution Number 76, 2014, authorizing the mayor and other appropriate city officials to execute and enter into an agreement by and between the City of Scranton, PPL, and the University of Scranton for the placement of surveillance cameras along a portion of Vine Street in the City of Scranton, as well as any and all additional documents that may be necessary to consummate this transaction.
What is the recommendation of the chair, temporary chair for the Committee on Public Safety?
As temporary chairperson for the Committee on Public Safety, I recommend final passage of item 7F.
Second.
On the question, roll call, please.
Mr. Wexler?
Yes.
Mr. Rogan?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Gahn?
Yes.
Mr. McGough?
Yes, I hereby declare item 7F legally and lawfully adopted. If there is no further business, entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
New members joined the club. We're looking for people who want to be active. We're looking for people who want to help out and with events. We're going to have events such as open mic, karaoke, plays, and so on and so forth. So we're looking for members who want to become active, for a place for them to go to at night, especially during the weekends, and have a good time and build a good community relationship for all ethnic groups. It's not just for one certain group of people. It's for the entire city and the entire Lackawanna County. And I'll turn it over to Marty. He's a charter member. He actually built this club.
My name is Mario Tomarelli. I started in 1953, started building this club, and all the members of the organization helped build this club. And today, I think I'm the only one left. That's it.
Marty, what made you become a member? Now, you probably just got out of the service.
No, I was a member when I was 12 years old.
Really?
I paid 50 cents, and we had different places to go. And since then, I've been a member, and I was very active in the association. I ran different parties, bus trips, and we kept it going for the longest time, for at least 50 years.
So the goal was...
The goal is
to build this facility in
Yes.
1950. You wanted to have your own place because you're moving
That's
around,
right.
meeting place here, meeting